Have you ever played a game that makes you feel like you're under a warm, cozy blanket while simultaneously making you want to scream into the pillow your head is resting on? This, for me, was Dark Chronicle, otherwise known as Dark Cloud 2 in North America. In my last video, I covered the first game in this series, Dark Cloud, and I had a good time with it. It had its fair share of problems, but it hasn't even been that long since I completed it, and I already want to go back and start another playthrough. When I mentioned I'd be covering the second game in the series, I got a lot of comments telling me how much I'd love the sequel, how many of the issues that the first game had were removed completely, and I'll admit, it got me very excited to see what all the fuss was about. Now I've completed it and I've had enough time to think about which title I prefer, I think I'm fairly confident in saying the original Dark Cloud. Now before I go into detail about why I made this choice, I'd like to make it clear that I did enjoy Dark Chronicle. It gave me that same feeling the first game did, that feeling of reliving games that existed back in my teenage years, but along with that came all of the issues these older games seemed to share, which inevitably led to this. As usual, I'll be explaining what I loved, liked, and disliked about this title as we dive back into the world of terror to embark on another world-building adventure. The game starts with a young woman running from a group of assassins. It throws you directly into the action by teaching you the basics of combat right out of the gate, which I appreciate. She realises these assassins may already be in her father's room, and much to her horror, Elven Sephiroth has already taken him out. Hard cut to a boy named Maximilian, otherwise known as Max. During the events of the game, he'll be narrating certain points in the story, as he's writing a letter to his mother who disappeared when he was 5 years old. Judging from his clothing, I assumed he was a bit of a street urchin, but turns out he actually lives in a mansion with his old man. Good for some, I suppose. He shows his employer, Cedric, that he's now a proud owner of a ticket to see a travelling circus troupe, and Cedric points out the strange stone Max is wearing in a pendant. Max tells him it was a gift from his father and he was to always wear it. This particular scene shows us that Max is a talented tinkerer and that this will more than likely be his shtick throughout the course of the game.
Fucking hell.
This horrifying cunt is Flotsam, the leader of the circus troupe Max has a ticket for. But it's snatched from his hands by a red-headed ragamuffin who runs off with our boy in hot pursuit. When Max eventually catches up with him, the boy tells him that he stole it because he really wanted to watch the show. Max, being quite the Mother Teresa, hands the thief the ticket because I guess his argument was just that convincing?
You passed. You might be able to do it. Hurry! The first door is waiting for you.
What is going on?
What was the test? Why was rewarding thievery the way to pass? Is this point ever brought up again? No! So now that Max has the ticket again, he's able to get into the tent, where he climbs up a ladder to get a better view. When he's up there, he hears Flotsam having a heated argument with the mayor of the town. Are you okay? Flotsam, it turns out, is quite the rascal, and his sole purpose for travelling to the town of Palm Brinks is to find a special stone, which he states is so close he can smell it. He's blackmailing the mayor to hunt for this stone, as he's been hiding something from the civilians for 15 years about an issue with the outside world. And surprise, surprise, it turns out that the stone that Max's father passed to him was that special stone, causing Max to flee from Flotsam and his insane clown posse.
Max! This way!
I was so scared then, but in a way it was really fun.
Take your time. After we're rescued by Max's friend, Donnie, and the genuinely beautiful opening song wraps up, Max makes up his mind to venture outside of the city walls, using the exit through the sewers. And voila, we're introduced to the classic Dark Cloud dungeon crawling segment, and oh boy do I have a few good things to say about this. Now, most of the issues I had with the original game admittedly did get fixed here. Camera issues are virtually gone, gameplay has a little more going on than just mash X to win, though that aspect still hasn't gone entirely. Both central characters get a ranged weapon which do an extremely good job against aerial foes. I tended to forget about them, to be honest, which left them severely underpowered by the end of the game, but I only have myself to blame there really. The thirst system has been completely removed, which I was so fucking happy to see. Good riddance. And finally, there are only 2 central characters, 4 if you include the extra vehicles and transformations the 2 heroes get to utilise. This makes swapping between the 2 so much faster, and they both get to share the ability to pick up this game's version of Atla, the gacha balls that contain village parts. I'll go into more detail about those later into the video. Abs, the method of increasing your weapon stats, has returned to Dark Chronicle in the form of experience bubbles. It works almost the same as the first game, including the need to use stones to power weapons up. only here they take the form of crystals which you can break down and synthesize using the points you get from accumulating enough abs. Eventually, when all of the correct stats are met, you can evolve your weapon into something much more powerful. And for people who enjoy something a bit more relaxing, fishing has made a glorious comeback which I easily sunk a few hours into. And there's a new minigame called Sfida for the golf enthusiast. That's not me, however. Clemps didn't sink any hours into this, and in fact he ignored it almost completely. Sorry. Moving back onto the story, as you press on into the dungeon, Flotsam graces us with his presence yet again and sticks his pet elephant on us, which introduces us, technically, to our third playable character and a new mechanic for Max to use. To properly use this third character, we first need to make him a new energy pack. This is where the make function fits in. To make something, you first need to find ideas which are spread around towns. You take a picture of objects with a camera and they'll be saved in a picture book, which Max can then put together in his mind in order to make a new item. After you finish this short tutorial, you can now take the reins of the Game Breaker 2000, Steve! Steve is the polar opposite of Flotsam. Whereas Flotsam is a naughty boy, Steve is quite the good boy indeed. His main use throughout your playthrough is to take down larger enemies and later into the game as a speedy way of traversing dungeon floors. However, what makes Steve such an angel is he can attack virtually everything in the game and can either one-shot them or take them down twice as fast as both of our protagonists. Of course, it isn't recommended to use Steve all of the time, as he can't be used in most boss fights. It's lucky that switching from Steve to either of our protagonists before he sucks up all of the experience will spread it out equally between both weapons of the character we choose. Steve can also make use of experience throughout the game. Instead of upgrading his weapons through evolution, you buy extra parts through Cedric. This can turn him into a roller skating rocket launcher to a laser shooting motorcycle. And as ridiculously exciting as that may sound, I found controlling the bike whilst fighting enemies about as fun as stubbing my fucking toe. Finally, a word to the wise. Don't buy this upgrade. This will give Steve an irreversible cancer that causes him to repeat the same 3 words of dialogue ad nauseum and legitimately made me mute my TV set.
I'm gonna get you guys! Not doing too bad! Not doing too bad! Gotta hang in there! Gotta hang in there!
I later found out there was an option hidden away in his fucking core which allows you to disable it, but it was too little too late, and completely my fault. I'm sorry, Steve. Anyways, back to the story. Cedric confronts the mayor of the town over his strange activity. The mayor, named Need, tells Cedric everything, but the outside world has been essentially destroyed. Cedric, now a man on a mission, presses the mayor to open the Blackstone Railroad so he and others can venture out into the world and see if there's anything they can do. Coincidentally, once Max exits the sewer and sees the outside world for the first time in his life, Cedric pulls up next to him in the Blackstone train, giving Max a permanent method of transport. This brings me on to one of my questions about the game's story. Are you honestly trying to convince me that an entire town's worth of people were totally fine and content with being kept behind closed gates for 15 years? And not one of them thought of going outside of the walls until Max just happened to feel like it? Do the populace not have family outside of the walls? Do they not feel like going out for a walk outside of the city gates only to be refused? I feel like this was a total forethought of the scriptwriter, because in the grand scheme of things, who actually cares? But it's still unbelievable enough to stick in my mind after I finish the game. Moving back to Max, Cedric explains exactly what happened 15 years ago. The entire world was laid to waste by a mysterious man named Emperor Griffin. The only reason why the town of Palm Brinks was spared was due to the stone that Max now wears around his neck. This means Griffin's cronies such as Flotsam and his travelling circus will be pursuing them to reclaim it. And speaking of Flotsam, he's still hot on our trail, which leads to a great little boss fight on top of a train. The strange boy we met earlier reappears just as we think Flotsam has the upper hand, and he reveals himself to be our next central protagonist in disguise, Monica, a princess from 100 years in the future. She overkills the shit out of Flotsam, leading to the duo teaming up. Now you'll have to excuse me here, because this is where the time travel bullshit comes into play, and well, I don't think I need to explain how this can potentially get messy. Monica explains to Max that the world in 100 years has been dramatically changed due to Emperor Griffin destroying locations in the past to impact the future. Essentially, by destroying origin points in Max's time, it can completely erase whole towns or cities in Monica's time, meaning that people who have the power to stop Griffin no longer exist. Monica has travelled back in time to recreate these origin points, and this is what you'll be doing for the rest of the game. Recreating locations in the past, travelling into the future to meet with people or towns that were erased in order to stop Emperor Griffin. A good question at this point would be, why did Monica choose Max as her partner in crime? The answer is pretty simple. The stone around Max's neck is an Atlamilia, the same type of stone that Tone possessed in the original game. Monica also owns an Atlamilia that allows her to go into the past, whereas Max's one allows him to jump into the future. How she tracked him down so fast, I have absolutely no idea, and to be honest, I doubt the game does either. She just does. Fuck you, and more to the point, fuck me. So how exactly do you rebuild origin points? Well, adventuring into the empty village of Sindane and the second dungeon, Rainbow Butterfly Wood, explain this to us quite well. After some compulsory story segments, Monica and Max find a house full of a dwarven-like race named Furbits. Monica decides to physically abuse this Furbit and then has the gall to say,
I wonder why he got so mad.
"Really, bitch?" Anyways, our next mission in order to unlock the ability to rebuild is to save a few Furbits who ventured out to find a young lady named Holly who vanished from their household without a trace. When we eventually find them, we bump into my persona.
What's going on here? There's a hook stuck in my beautiful lips.
And a familiar face from Dark Cloud 1.
We want to get through here. Do you think you can move that boulder for us?
Oh, that? Piece of cake. Wait right here.
Why would you make the ape sound sexy? God, I wish that were me. Okay, so now we've rescued the Furbits, which means we can finally unlock the much sought after ability to rebuild.
What in the world's that noise?
What's that thing?
Everything off the internet! Now, 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 now!
Carpenterian, the single most terrifying automaton I've ever seen. The Carpenterian is a Furbit contraption that can build pretty much anything. Trees, houses, roads, rivers, anything to do with building that you can think of, it can make. However, in order to achieve this, it needs geostones. Geostones are stones which hold the knowledge of the ancient ones. By putting a geostone inside of the Carpenterian reactor, it can literally upload the data from the stone in order to remember the blueprints. These are Dark Chronicle's versions of Atla, revisiting a point I brought up earlier. However, from this point on, this is where I really started to realise how much I preferred the first game to its sequel. And it all boils down to town building and the requirements you need to fix the future. In Dark Cloud, Atla was spread randomly throughout a dungeon floor. You'd pick one up and get an item you could place. The menu was incredibly simple to use, and removing items you accidentally placed down was as easy as pressing the square button. In Dark Chronicle, and this is a good thing, there's only a single geostone on every floor, which means less time faffing around trying to find a bunch of them. So far so good. However, when you get back, it turns out you need materials this time. Materials can be found within dungeons, but most of the time you'll be running out of said materials pretty fast. So you'll be revisiting your Furbit friend to restock your materials, only to find out the next item you need to place down is missing materials, meaning you'll need to go all the way back to repurchase more materials. I even opened a Google Doc to make sure my journeys back and forth weren't so frequent. And this got tedious for me very fast. The analysis section of the building menu allows you to see what parts you need to cause a change in the future, so at least the game isn't totally sadistic. There's also the fact that placing and removing objects in the sequel is so much slower. This isn't terrible, but it definitely makes the entire process feel so much more sluggish compared to Dark Cloud. Also, when you finish parts of the analysis and make that jump into the future, if you squint really hard and focus into your environments, you may see tiny treasure chests. Turns out, these are really fucking important. These tiny chests are your only method to powering up your health and defense. And I ended up missing so many because they blended far too well into their environments. Couldn't you make them red or something? Was Earth Brown your only choice? Will Clemps ever stop nitpicking? And finally, the thing which I vehemently disliked in Dark Chronicle is returning to Palm Brinks to collect civilians. Now, a thing to keep in mind is that I'm a first-time player of this game. I have no previous knowledge of where to go or what to do. I initially started to play it without a guide. However, as soon as the need to collect civilians for your villages and towns became a thing, I felt it necessary to use one, or I'd never be able to finish on time. Basically, if you look into your analysis, it'll tell you need a specific character to move into your village, or a change won't occur in the future, which is crucial for story progression. Only issue with that is it doesn't tell you where in Palm Brinks the person is, and Palm Brinks is a pretty large place. This, of course, caused me to become very lost, which led to frustration, which led to a slow building, seething distaste for this particular element of the game. Now that's out of the way. After your adventures end in the Rainbow Wood, fighting a rainbow butterfly, only revealing it to be the Furbit's missing lady, Holly, we continue our adventure. Going into the completed future to see another eldritch horror, it tells us to visit his old friend Crest in order to find out some information about Emperor Griffin. We do so, only to find out Crest has been killed and his protege, Lynn, has lost her memory of the events. Using more time travel hijinks, they go back into the past in order to bring Crest back and to revive Lynn's memories. And we get there just in time for our secondary big bad to make his appearance. And we've all seen just how dedicated he is to Emperor Griffin's cause.
That's Gaspard! How did he get here?
Watch out! The lighthouse is on fire!
Quite the observant one, aren't you? Gaspard firing on the lighthouse leads to a very fun boss fight, where Max has to fight away a bunch of flames from Lynn, and Monica jumps over to Gaspard's ship to duel with her father's murderer. We fight off Gaspard, but it turns out that Crest's fate has long been sealed. He dies in the exact same way he did before in order to save Lynn's life. His final words request that she become a sage, something which he's dedicated his life towards becoming. Present-day Lynn hears this, and taking her master's words to heart, strives to become one, which she does, 100 years into the future. Now taking on her master's old name, Crest the Great Sage gives Monica and Max a very useful piece of information. Emperor Griffin is located 10,000 years into the past, and that Monica and Max's Atlamillia can't be used to achieve such a feat. But another location in the future that needs rebuilding, named the Lunar Labs, might be able to help us, so it's off to collect geostones yet again.
My master.
No.
The next segment, back in Max's time, isn't crucially important, minus an ancient mural that depicts a moon falling from the sky. I wonder if this will come back into play later. What it boils down to is this little lunar rabbit named Pao befriending a creature known as a Shigura, who he named Shingala. Long story short, it's about Pao's camaraderie with Shingala and eventually letting him go to be free with members of his own species. This touching friendship would eventually lead Shingala to revisit once a year with a collection of lunar stones. These stones would eventually cause humans who came into contact with it to gain vast amounts of knowledge, leading to the creation of the Lunar Labs. And once we're in there, we meet another familiar face. Osmond, one of the main characters of the first game, is now back to help us travel 10,000 years into the past with the help of his colleagues. They create a large train known as the Ixion, which still needs a bit of work before it's completed. But as luck would have it, a projection pops up of a woman from the rebellion, a force opposing Griffin. The woman turns out to be Max's mother, Elena. This incredibly fortuitous turn of events leads Max's mother to explain how Griffin has been changing the future and why she left Max and his father. Griffin owns a third Atlamillia, the Atlamillia of the Sun, that can allow him to slowly chip away at the future bit by bit. Apparently, an Atlamillia chooses its owner, and the owner has to be, for all intents and purposes, good. So how Griffin got his hands on the stone is a mystery. She also explains that because Griffin would surely try to locate the other Atlamillia owners, she went to protect the original owner of the Earth Atlamillia, Max's father. They fell in love and birthed a child. However, because she's from a different timeline, she can't stay there forever, and needed to return to help fight Griffin's forces. So, the next plan of action for our heroes whilst they wait for the Ixion to finish development is to help Max's mother and her comrades rebuild a rebel base in the future, to bring back an ancient weapon that has the power to stop a large number of Griffin's forces. When we're nearing completion, we have our final confrontation with Gaspard, whose motivation for being a massive twat are revealed to us after his first form.
I had a mother too, just like everyone else.
No, never. Basically, Gaspard was a victim of prejudice all his life due to being half human, half changeling. After his beloved mother died, he decided to get revenge on the world and joined with Griffin. But just as our main characters cause him to rethink his evil ways, Griffin taps him with some more time travel bullshit and turns him into Satan. But we take him down really easily with Steve regardless, so, you know, bye. Once we're out of a dungeon and the rebel base has been restored, it introduces us to the bestest boy. Better than Steve, better than the funny face in the sky, it's fucking Paznos. Oh, Paznos. It fills virtually every tick box in that old teenage segment of my brain. Its design is flawless to me. Can't give enough praise to this thing, bravo level 5. As well as seeing Paznos in action, Max can finally be reunited with his mother. Their interaction here is something I can actually side with Max with. He has a legitimate emotional outburst at his mother, calling her selfish for not being able to return to his time to live with him. And if she knew this was going to happen, she should have never given birth to him in the first place. I like this moment. It's kind of a way a young teenage kid would react given the circumstances. Gold star. With Pasnos leaving the future in safe hands, it's up to Max and Monica to return back to the absolutely disgusting Ixion. Of course, Osmond was in charge of designing this thing, and with an outfit like that, I'm not entirely surprised. The Ixion does what it was built to do and takes us back to the past, where we're confronted with a barren wasteland and a lonely castle. When Max and Monica enter, they're greeted by a lunar rabbit.
You've come this far. Excellent, just like myself. No wonder the Atlamelia chose you. What? You must be joking. You're Emperor Griffin?
Yeah, go on then. This lunar rabbit, given the name Emperor Griffin by the people of the future out of fear, takes on Max and Monica, using a selection of roses as his main attack. We take him down, but of course it was all a big ruse. He snatches both Atlamelia and initiates a transformation into a much more intimidating form. With all three Atlamelia, he now has the power to teleport the castle to Max's time period to destroy it more efficiently. This entire segment requires you merge the future and the past in something called a chrono union. This will allow the people of the future to bring Pasnos through space and time in order to take down the large flying fortress of death. To do this, you need to do a bit of backtracking. Go to all of the old dungeons you went through, find an extra path, and get to the end of what is essentially a hard mode version of that dungeon. Beat the boss, and take the gem you need for the Union. And you know, skipping all the bullshit, we do it. Hooray! Pasnos decides to literally make my dick explode by transforming into a colossal looking mech, which takes the floating island and slam dunks the fuck out of it, allowing Max and Monica to take the final trip inside. During this dungeon, a spirit named Queen Alexandra visits us. She tells us that Emperor Griffin's real name is Cyrus, and that she hopes we can see him for who he really is. She gives us one final task, to rebuild the garden that Alexandra and Cyrus spent time in together, so he may gain these precious memories back and stop being such an arsehole. As we build, we get flashbacks of Cyrus and Alexandra. These are some of the best scenes in the game, bar none. Cyrus was a lunar rabbit who had no clear purpose in life. What he did have was a fascination with flowers. Alexandra noticed this when he snuck into her garden and was apprehended by a guard. She spared him any punishment and made him her gardener. They shared dozens of happy memories of in the castle, till war for the Atlamelia came about. Alexandra died protecting her castle, and Cyrus was left alone. His vengeance for humankind and their lust for bloodshed and war started to curdle his mind, and something dark was born from that hatred. The need for the complete universal genocide of humankind. So you've completed the garden, you've traversed the castle, it's time for the final boss fight, and oh boy is it a doozy. His first phase is pretty simple, fire your ranged weapons at the Atlamelia that float around him until they're all down. His second form is a pretty dope 1v1 fight where he rips off his wings and uses them to attack you. His third form allows him to go Super Saiyan for a moment where he becomes much more physically aggressive, but when you take down his third form, and who might you be? This dark element is a being that was born from Cyrus's heartbreak, very similar to Seda and the Dark Genie from the first game. The element is the entity that was controlling his blind hatred of the human race. Cyrus attempts to take it down after his fight with Max and Monica, realizing that not all humans are as evil as he thought. This ends rather badly for him, sealing the young rabbit's fate. Also, one of the two moons is falling. This is where that completely out of nowhere hieroglyph comes into play. The Ancient Ones had created a fail-safe way to cleanse the planet of all life if things had gotten too fucked up, and boy howdy is it ever getting fucked up. This was another segment of Dark Chronicle's story that I really enjoyed. Seeing that one of the two moons that are one of the first things I think of when I visualise the Dark Cloud universe as a whole now being used as a weapon to bring forth the apocalypse is a really neat idea, though it really isn't doing anything to help a topic of discussion that I brought up in the first video, and that's the inevitable Zelda comparisons. Ah, shit. It's now a race against time, literally, to destroy the dark element, doing a fast 5-creature boss rush with Steve, then climbing to the top where the final boss's tactics revolve around switching back and forth to Max and Monica, depending on the colour of its core. When the dark element is vanquished, it turns out by pure cosmic chance that Cyrus has the ability to stop the moon from crashing into the planet. How incredibly fucking lucky. The little rabbit passes away, going into the afterlife where Alexandra is waiting for him, in a garden filled with flowers. And with that, the world is now saved, but that also means that everything has to return back to normal, which means Monica has to say her farewells to Max. What I find interesting about this scene is it focuses less on the two friends and more on Max and his mother. Max can never ever see his mother again. This is their final farewell too. Max and his mother embrace in an incredibly tender scene, where Max tells her he'll write a letter about his life and he'll leave it in this exact spot, so that 100 years later, when he's dead and buried, she can read the letter and experience her now deceased son's life. It's honestly a pretty bittersweet ending. But you know me, I'm all over that tragic shit. And so concludes Dark Chronicle. Kind of. There's an extra dungeon after you complete the game where Monica actually returns using a time travel device given to her by Crest the Great Sage. And the final boss of that dungeon is a very surprising cameo from Dark Cloud 1, but honestly, I'd say I'm happy where I left the game at. All in all, I can't say I'd be returning to play Dark Chronicle anytime soon. Will I eventually? Of course. In fact, I think a large reason why I disliked the longer time-wasting segments was because I felt I was on a deadline. One day I'll return and play it in a more relaxed, carefree environment, and who knows, maybe my overall thoughts will change. Did I like the game? Excluding all of the negatives I brought up, I really did. Games like this are so rare nowadays, and it was a fun experience for the most part. I really loved the concept of building the past to rebuild the future. It was interesting. It's just a massive shame that I was legitimately frustrated during almost all of Dark Chronicle's building segments. They felt, to me at least, like they were getting in the way of my enjoyment. I recommend this game. To anyone who loves old PS2 classics, this is something that can't be ignored. Just find yourself a Google Doc and free up some time. You're absolutely gonna need it. Hey there everybody, thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, then share the video around to people or places that you think might enjoy it. First of all, I'd like to give a big shout out to the talented Megumi Goats, the guest artist of this video's thumbnail, and a couple of reactions throughout. Her Twitter details can be found down below, so be sure to give her a follow. Coming up next, we have my take on the Kingdom Hearts series, starting from 1 and moving my way up. To give you all a rough idea about how I'm going to schedule this, I'll do 2 Kingdom Hearts games, then move on to another big off-topic project or 2. Then move back to Kingdom Hearts in order to stop myself from getting horrifically burnt out. Without people helping me out on Patreon, these Kingdom Hearts videos wouldn't have been made nowhere near this early. So if you want to help your old boy Clemps out and see your name scrolling on the right, then there's a link coming up soon on screen or the first link in the description. Thank you again, and I'll see you all in the next video.